to, again, Voice of the Valleys with your host and friendly neighborhood far-right thug, Mr. George Cresswell. Hope we're all doing well today. Ladies and gentlemen, hope we're all having a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever we are. Got a few things which I want to get into today. Off the back of some things that I would have just talked about a matter of, hours ago. But this one, I've recorded 3 episodes in one day that one of them's uploading at the moment. Obviously, I'm dealing on basically dial-up Wi-Fi here because we are so technologically advanced in the UK and in Wales that, you know, it's taken me about 6 hours or more about 3 hours or more to upload half of a podcast. So yeah, on one platform, that is, mind you, on one platform. So anyway, a couple of things I wanted to talk about today. So we're going to be going over the recent quote-unquote protests that have been happening in the US recently with regards to Los Angeles and Mexico. We're going to be looking at a very interesting article from Wales Online, which was from a little while ago, but is why should be casting. It's from 3 years ago. Casting a lot of shadow on the Welsh Government's Nation of Sanctuary plan and really what it is a whole cover for. The fact that now, even if you are so much as a civic nationalist, as some people have quoted them or started calling them, we're all going to the same gulag, so you might as well stop the nonsense. And we're going to finish up then with what all of these mass migration initiatives have really been about, and a little bit of hope for the future. So, recently, as you'll know, the last couple of days, it's been a lot of protests, and there might even be more happening by the time this episode goes out, due to the ICE raids in LA. So, if you're not familiar, ICE is Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and they seem to be doing a great job at the moment. President Trump seems to have said a couple of confusing things recently with regards to the hotel and tour and the hotel industry and the farming industry. Seem to be backtracking on a lot of things, but we'll see how it goes. However, in America especially, and the same thing is true in the UK, your perspective on things is going to be largely tainted by where you get your information from, and that'll be what they say about it. And there's a reason, for example, that people are rapidly not trusting mainstream news outlets anymore to give them the coverage of these things, because they know how heinously biased and how much they'll downplay violent acts from one side and try and upregulate and put more attention on and misrepresent even just non-violent stuff from the other side. We see it with the whole January 6th insurrection, quote unquote, but not, of course, with what is quite literally in many ways a foreign insurrection, an act of war that occurred in LA recently. So this was the video that I'm referring to, ladies and gentlemen, from ABC News. And as you'll see, there's what appears to be a police car that's on fire in this clip. But ABC reporter, this is from Libs of TikTok, says not to bring in law enforcement to the LA riots because, quote, it's just a bunch of people having fun watching cars burn. Ladies and gentlemen, here's our clip for you.
Large group of people. It could turn very volatile if you move law enforcement in there in the wrong way and turn what is just a bunch of people having fun watching cars burn into a massive confrontation and altercation between officers and demonstrators. So a large group of...
So there you go. Literally just comes out and says it because ABC wants to be more friendly to the people on this side of the aisle. Far more on the side of the left-hand side of politics. The Democrats are obviously not happy with what's going on at the moment. They're not happy that America is turning back into a more positive country for the American people. So they downplay burning of police cars, these acts of terrorism, acts of war in many instances, that put many people in danger. We've seen people's cars be surrounded, mob rule in many of these places. But no, it's just a bunch of people having fun watching cars burn. Well, last I checked, it didn't matter what reason you had and you were just having fun. It was illegal to burn cars, let alone state state operative cars, police cars and ICE cars and whatever it may be. But of course, when it is on this side of the aisle, it is perfectly justifiable. Okay, it is perfectly justifiable to do this on this side of the aisle, because these are, the freedom fighters, so to speak, for, the oppressed class that have gone into the country in many instances illegally. I know these people like to say that no human is illegal, quote unquote. Yeah, when you enter a country illegally, that does in fact make you a criminal. By definition, you did something criminal by entering the country illegally. Makes you a criminal. But of course, the news attempting to downplay it at every single turn, even rather hilariously, I believe this is ABC News again, when there are rioters taunting the media in the background of some of these clips. And the reporter still has to describe the riots as mostly peaceful. This is the term that's coming out about these. We were told the riots in 2020 with BLM were mostly peaceful when they were burning cities down, quite literally, like in cities like Minnesota, in states like Minnesota, sorry. Then you have this one, they now call it fiery, but mostly peaceful. And I've heard some people say it's now cries of hope or something like that. But this is another ABC News segment, ladies and gentlemen, as rioters taunt this reporter, I'm not sure what her name is, in downtown LA. She has to call the riots, as you heard before, mostly peaceful. I'm just going to check if this clip. Okay, here's that clip for you, ladies and gentlemen.
Demonstrations had been going on right outside the Federal Detention Center. Most of those demonstrators were very peaceful. They were chanting, they were shouting. People were driving by, honking their horns. And again, they were expressing their anger about the detention of so many immigrants at the Federal Center. Most of the evening, the federal agents stayed inside the building, but at a certain point, some of the demonstrators got very close to the property. In fact, some of them went onto the property, started tagging the building, started banging on fences. And shortly after all that happened, the agents started firing off tear gas, and then they came out.
So you heard them say demonstrations been going on, but they've been mostly peaceful. As I said, it's just people having fun, burning cars. It's been mostly peaceful. It's only been a little bit of attempted murder going on. For example, when people are hurling rocks at Border Patrol and unmarked vehicles leaving Paramount in California, for example, which, oh yes, this was caught on video as well, ladies and gentlemen. So you have now people, as the federal vehicles for ICE and Border Patrol are leaving the area of Paramount, California, you have protesters, quote unquote, launching projectiles at the vehicles, which obviously could very easily cause them to spin out. It could obviously result in somebody else getting hurt, obviously intending to hurt the people that are driving these vehicles, because obviously they're seen as the enemy, right? They're completely dehuman. These people that are throwing rocks and everything like that are completely dehumanized, and seeing them as nothing more than the enemy in many instances. And to an extent as well, this is an important thing to say, is that to an extent, you can argue that that's what we've seen in Ballymena recently with regards to the riots that have been going on over there. Where a lot of the things that are happening now are happening. The scenes that you're seeing here are very similar to the ones you're seeing in Ballymena at the moment, which is important to say. It's also important to say the distinction between the two is that these riots that are going on in LA at the moment are in support of foreign insurrection in the United States and in support of open borders, illegal immigration, terrorism in many instances. I wouldn't be surprised. Some people in America are talking right now with the escalations that are going on in the Middle East between Israel and Iran, with the open borders that Biden administration fostered. People are genuinely concerned that, oh my God, we got Iranian sleeper cells in the US. You know what I mean? They're very thankful for that Second Amendment at the moment. But one side is fighting to defend its very existence and its people against government and against a system that's seeking to ethnically replace them and in many instances put them into serfdom in their own homeland. Namely, that's what's happening in Ireland and Northern Ireland and all across the Western Hemisphere at the moment. And the riots in LA are in support of the agenda that's seeking to do the exact same thing. So one set of people's fighting for their very lives, their very land, and their very, existence and their future. The other one's fighting so they can continue to sponge off the American taxpayer, basically. So big difference between the two, even if it looks very similar. But here's that clip for you now, ladies and gentlemen, of where the cars are coming out of Paramount and the person is launching what appears to be bricks and stuff at the cars as they leave. Fact of the matter is, if you're going to do this, you should be charged with attempted murder. You should be charged with attempted murder. Absolutely. Should absolutely be charged with attempted murder if you're going to go ahead and do this. So that's what it is at the end of the day. And that's what it is at the end of the day. So I can only hope we'll see some prosecutions and some big deportations off the back of it. I dare say we may do, because, ladies and gentlemen, this is a little bit of a segue. Why, for all the faults of everything going on at the moment, and things could obviously always be better, they seem to be going pretty well right now in America with Trump and J.D. Vance at the helm. And I want to show you this, ladies and gentlemen. So this, I showcased Rupert Lowe doing something very, very similar to this, which I'll go and find after this now. It's refreshing to see politicians on our side of the aisle be very up and very unapologetic and very competent with this shit posting. This is very, very good to see. So I'm not sure who the person is that's being referred to in this post, but it says here, the menswear guy, as far as I know, is like a Asian guy, but like imitates like old conservatives to try and, talk shit and disrespect and make jokes about them, right? Particularly about their fashion sense, right? As far as I know, he dressed up like an typical old white conservative, boomer kind of guy, right? And the guy he's quite a famous guy as far as I know. And he just openly admitted, apparently, and this is what people are doing at the moment, they're making life very, very easy, very, very easy indeed. The menswear guy just openly admitted that he's here illegally. And somebody quoted this post and said, J.D. Vance, I know you're reading this, and you have the opportunity to do the funniest thing ever. And I just want to share this with you now, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to share with you J.D. Vance's response, because this is what I mean when I say this is masterful shitposting. So for those of you who are listening and not watching, the guy commented this, and then J.D. Vance just commented underneath it. No words, no statement, no nothing, but the nodding head gif of Jack Nicholson being like, yes, yes. That is what J.D. Vance posted underneath this post, and it is truly hilarious. It is truly hilarious. And this is not something that is unique to America. So this is something I'm going to find for you now, ladies and gentlemen, because this was truly hilarious as well. So Rupert Lowe is an MP for Great Yarmouth in the UK. And somebody posted something. In fact, I'll find the original post. Actually, I commented something and I said hashtag Lobi1 Kenobi. And that should give you an idea of what sort of shithousery you should be expecting from this next post. So somebody posted this, and the post itself was a Star Wars reference. It was a Star Wars meme, and it was the photo of Princess Leia. And the comment was, as you'll see now, where is it? So the post was, I'm trying not to, I don't want to show Rupert's response yet. So, this, ladies and gentlemen, was the post, and I've deliberately hidden the caption because you can see Lowe's comment below it. So this was what somebody posted. I basically said the right, realizing certain people were right all along about things, and I can't remember the post off the top of my head. In fact, let me come back and I'll read it for you. So it says, the British right to Rupert Lowe after conceding reform is a clown show, right? Which is what I've been saying a lot the whole time. However, I mentioned to you before that we also have an MP, or we also have a representative in this country that is masterful at shitposting. And that is Mr. Rupert Lowe, ladies and gentlemen. So in response to this person, Rupert Lowe posted this. And it is directly from his X account, as you can see. So for those of you who are watching and not, again, listening, not watching, ladies and gentlemen, this is the photo of Obi-Wan Kenobi, or Ben Kenobi, from, I believe it's episode 4, A New Hope, when he's got the brown robe on in the desert. And he's just flicked the hood back, and instead of seeing Ewan McGregor's face, you see Rupert Lowe's face. I think this is fantastic. I think this is fantastic, because all the last sort of, all my life, really, it's been the left that has had all the cred. They were seen as like the counterculturals, the rebels, all of this stuff, right? But now that they've turned like super establishment neo-fascist, now it's the right of all people, like Christian conservatives and people like, I'm not saying Rupert Lowe is a Christian conservative by any means, but like people who are more nationalist bent that are actually getting traction with like the memes and stuff like that, especially with the younger generation. It is truly, truly fantastic. And it's just great to see that despite all of this, especially despite everything that's going on right now, Rupert Lowe is obviously instrumental in trying to get the rape gang inquiry off the ground at the moment. So he's having a lot of really important work to do. But it's important, especially people of the younger generation, they really appreciate this because, this is the kind of stuff that resonates with them a lot of the time. But I mentioned to you, ladies and gentlemen, that luckily, a lot of people are making life very easy for people like Tom Homan and ICE and all of these guys, right? So again, in America, people are just coming out and say it now. You had the menswear guy, and you also have a Democrat Minnesota state rep, Cowley Vang, I believe that's how you say her name. She just admitted on the House floor that she herself, Minnesota state rep, mind you, so no surprise it's Tim Walz's state that this has happened, that she is in fact an illegal alien. And she said that on the floor of the House on Monday, June 9th, 2025, which you'll hear right from her mouth now, ladies and gentlemen.
Because his mother had died, my father, as the one processing the paperwork, put my grandmother down as his mother. And so I am illegal in this country. My parents are illegal here in this country. Because his mother had died.
Ooh, boy. It's nice when they make it easy. Let me rewind it for you 2 seconds, ladies and gentlemen. Let me make sure that you can hear it.
And so I am illegal in this country.
Tom Homan, get on it, man. Get on it. It is nice when they make it easy. Tom Homan, in theory, could be around her house tomorrow. Oh, well, back to where you go. Back to where you came from. And that's what should happen. Because ultimately what was happened is this person has served no time. This person has done no, penance, punishment, whatever, for their transgression, for entering the country illegally, committing immigration fraud by the sounds of it. You gotta go. Because that's illegal. Now, the thing is, what was I going on about all that for? Well, what's going on in LA at the moment, and all the nonsense with regards to illegal immigrants or legal aliens and all this stuff, right, is emblematic of what the Welsh government want to do with the Nation of Sanctuary plan. So the Nation of Sanctuary plan is basically nothing less, is going to be nothing less than the ethnic cleansing, attempted ethnic cleansing of Wales. And that's what the government wants, because they see it as a way to further secure their political power, bring political power away from the people they've already alienated, namely the Welsh people, put an alien culture onto them, and remove their ability to remove it politically, remove their ability to, in many ways, remove it by force, because we can't, it's obviously a lot harder to bear arms in this country than it is in some areas of the US, for example. And surprisingly, a lot of the areas of the US with very tight gun laws also happen to be very high crime areas. As we'll see now as well, with very tight gun laws in the UK, for example, does not stop gun violence, particularly in the most heinous crimes, which we have seen, which I have been in correspondence with somebody recently who has been very on the ground with the rape gangs and stuff like that, and they helped me with some really nice information with regards to what was going on in Wales. They linked me to this Wales Online article, and this was reported back in February 2022. And it was an inquiry finding disturbing evidence of organised networks and gangs abusing children in Swansea. Or as it's also known, it should be known now as Swansistan. That's what it should be known as. I don't care who that offends, obviously. And the same thing in Cardiff as well. Said there was also evidence of a series of missed opportunities to disrupt such networks and activities. So if you don't think this is going on in Wales, it is, I promise you. As I said, I know somebody who had a first-hand experience with some of these people. An inquiry found evidence of organised child sexual abuse and exploitation by criminal gangs and networks in Swansea, but accused police and other authorities of downplaying the scale of it over concerns about negative publicity. Now, in the case of where we've seen it, the reason why we have an independent rape gang inquiry into Muslim rape gangs is that's the only reason why. Concerns over the presence of Islam, concerns over the presence of Muslims, concerns over the presence then of people where these are predominantly Muslim countries that they've come from. And not native to Wales, a lot of these people, put it that way. And this is where we're seeing it now. Again, people want to pretend that it's not happening. I'm like, it is. That's why, for example, that the presence of a mosque in Abergavenny, which we talked about 2 episodes ago, should really, really worry you. Because sooner or later, our nice little quaint valley, rural valley, previously mining towns are going to start resembling Swansea and Cardiff. And that's not good. You won't like that. You won't like whatever town you reside in now, whatever little town you reside in, looking like Luton. Or looking like some of the other places in England where we've seen this, for example, like Oldham and places like that. You won't like that, I can promise you. That's why we need to start waking up to it. And the Nation of Sanctuary plan is going to make every single bit of this worse. It's going to turn Wales into what you're seeing in LA at the moment, and it's going to make all the illegal migration problems worse. Swansea, for example, was one of 6 case study areas looked at by the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, which found extensive failures, quote unquote, in the way child sexual exploitation by criminal gangs was tackled. It spoke to victims in the case study areas, some of whom reported being raped, abused, and in one case, not in Swansea, this one, forced to perform sex acts on a group of 23 men whilst held at gunpoint, and concluded that they were often blamed by authorities for the ordeals they suffered, while some were even slapped with criminal records for offences closely linked to their sexual exploitation. It tells you a lot. When I was corresponding with this other person as well, they knew, or they had evidence that, for example, I'll see if I can pull it up now. There was Lord Ahmed, for example, he's now been convicted in Rotherham, 2 senior police chiefs, 4 councillors and an MP. The 4 councillors have all admitted, quote unquote, consensual sex with underage girls, but were not prosecuted. Obviously, ladies and gentlemen, it's impossible to have consensual sex with an underage girl. That is impossible to do. So again, shows you how warped and twisted the mind of these people are when you can force a young girl, and again, it doesn't seem to name the age, or rather put the age of the girls in question. You've seen reports for some as young as 10, forced to perform sex acts on a group of 23 men. 23 men whilst held at gunpoint. Now, again, if this doesn't illustrate for you, ladies and gentlemen, who benefits from gun laws, I don't know what will. Because who do you think is going to be one of the best people to potentially handle this and solve this problem and ensure people don't reoffend again? A vengeful father with a firearm, that's who. But no, of course not. Firearms get taken away from native law-abiding people. And of course, often foreigners, but criminals. Doesn't matter who they are, doesn't matter where they're from, doesn't matter what race they are. That's something I've been noticing a lot of people leaving comments on some of the things that I said recently. And going on about me being racist, because, oh, you don't care about this guy because he's the wrong race. Oftentimes, bringing up things that I haven't seen. That's one of them. And I'm like, I don't give a fuck what race he is. If he's a child sexual predator, good riddance. Do away with him. Don't give a fuck. But these people will use that to try and obfuscate away from there is a direct ethno-religious, that's a great term that I saw Charlie Downs use recently, ethno-religious component to what is going on. And that's why the term rape jihad has caught on in many places. And rape genocide and things like that, because that's exactly what it is. And people love to pull out these isolated incidents where more often than not, the people who are white British child predators, they get everything thrown out there. Their case is publicized, it's pushed, it's, you know, they don't spend, they don't have the police trying to downplay it a lot of the time, unless it's like some kind of counselor or something like that, right? More often than not, they fast track through the courts, their name and everything is put out there, and they dealt with, which is what we want, right? This is what we want. We have no problem with that. We praise that, because we want child predators off the streets and behind bars. In many instances, they don't deserve the air they breathe, right? Can we get that out on the table? But then you do have to acknowledge that many of these are ethno-religiously motivated. Ethno-religiously motivated. And the people who benefit from gun laws most of the time are the criminals, because they will always have guns, whether they're white, whether they're white, black, Hispanic, whatever it might be. Don't care. They will benefit from gun laws because they will always have guns. Something that Sammy the Bull Gravano really drilled home for me, really drilled home in that Patrick Bet-David interview, saying one of the worst things you can do is take the gun out of the hand of the mother that's at home with their child, and there's a creep in the neighborhood that wants to rape her, break in. One of the biggest things that's going to color his perception of if he's going to break into that house or not is the unsureness, the uncertainty of if there's going to be a firearm in that home that she's going to be able to use, and fucking boom. Because otherwise, he's basically got a straight shot. Because say what you want, the transgender and feminist advocates will try and tell you there's no difference between men and women. There is. There is. And that young girl, that sad single mother potentially, or the mother that's waiting for her husband to come home from work, will certainly find out in that moment. And I hope you'd be happy. I hope you'd be happy, because at least there were strict gun laws. Hope you'd be very happy. Hope you'd be very happy that there is this girl, that nothing could be done by the community, where you have a community that could band together around this and solve this problem very quickly. They can't go and solve the problem, and in many instances the police won't go and solve the problem. They're directly either participating in it, or they're indirectly, tacitly covering up for it. Tacitly or indirectly covering up for it, or in many cases directly covering up for it. And then you have a girl being held at gunpoint, forced to do sex acts on 23 men. In this once great country. It's concluded that this might be down to a determination to ensure that they were not seen as another Rochdale or Rotherham, towns blighted by recent child sexual exploitation revelations, rather than a desire to root out and expose its scale. Swansea Council has claimed that it has robust systems in place to support young people. And what system you have to have in place to support a young girl that's been forced at gunpoint to do sex acts on 23 men? But that it supports all the recommendations made by the panel and is actively implementing the findings detailed in the report's conclusions. So this must be the J report. Professor Alexis J, who chaired the inquiry, said, the sexual exploitation of children by networks is not a rare phenomenon confined to a small number of areas with high-profile criminal cases. We found extensive failures by local authorities and police forces in the ways in which they tackled this sexual abuse. There appeared to be a flawed assumption that the child sexual exploitation was on the wane. However, it has become even more of a hidden problem and is increasingly underestimated. The report on the 8th, from the 18th, from the ISCA, I believe that's how you pronounce the abbreviation, featured harrowing testimony from more than 30 young witnesses across the 6 case study areas: Swansea, Bristol, Durham, St Helens, Tower Hamlets, and Warwickshire. The inquiry team said, quote, it did not receive a reliable picture of child sexual exploitation from these areas, with the data often confused and confusing. So there was evidence of child sexual exploitation by networks in all 6 areas, but that the relevant police forces were, quote, generally not able to provide any evidence about these networks. As we know, in many areas, they were, in some of them at least, directly involved. They've been involved in the cover-up since day one. Many of these people, many of these institutions. They said, for example, in Tower Hamlets and Swansea, that there was no data to suggest that any child exploitation by gangs, despite evidence to the contrary. So they were saying that there was no, again, going directly against the evidence that is available. The report said that in relation to Swansea, there were examples of child sexual exploitation by groups in the evidence seen by the inquiry, which should have been identified by the police. The biggest thing is that it's showing not only failures, but ideological bent and corruption of the police, that you can no longer trust them. You can no longer trust them. If you have a daughter and you're concerned for her safety in one of these areas, you can no longer trust them. Either they'll just give the person a slap on the wrist, or they won't do anything at all, and the person will never see justice. Because the most important thing that the Welsh government is focused on, as you know, ladies and gentlemen, is anti-racism, nation of sanctuary, and decolonisation. So we have fucking Dawn Bowden back again. Welsh museums produce charter to, quote, decolonise their collections. Here, Dawn Bowden proudly tells the Senedd Welsh museums have published a charter to decolonise their collections, which is obviously a great use of taxpayer cash.
People's Collection Wales, a federated partnership between Magweddfa Cymru, the National Library for Wales and the Royal Commission on the Ancient and Historic Monuments of Wales, has published a charter for decolonising the collection. People's Collection...
So there we go. If only they would publish a charter or publish a system of how they're going to, root out the 23 people that did the disgusting abuse of that young child. Well, presumably he's a young child, a young teenager, however old she was, because the news article didn't say. If only they would actually do something that's actually going to help ensure the safety and prosperity of the Welsh people. Of course not. No government is focused on this. No government is focused on this for their own people. Otherwise, you wouldn't have a Lake District mega mosque under construction, for example, which is what's going ahead right now. The locals don't want it. But this is part of, say it with me, ladies and gentlemen, the great replacement and ethnic cleansing of the UK and of the Western world. So, for example, now, ladies and gentlemen, you have this video from the site of where this new mega mosque, not just a mosque, mind you, a mega mosque, is being built in the once quaint and lovely Lake District.
From the second Ramadan to the second Dhul Hijjah, this is how far we've come, alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuhu from the South Lakes in the northwest of England, where we're building the first masjid in a 50-mile radius. We are in the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. the most beloved days to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where the reward for good deeds are multiplied many times over. I seek your help in these blessed days. Please donate generously, please make dua, and please share my plea. With your help, inshallah, help me to welcome the next Ramadan in my very own masjid. From the second Ramadan...
These people are colonizers. These people are simply colonizers. And they need to go. And every single MP, every single Prime Minister, every single person at any level that's contributed to this needs to face justice as well. Every person that's in some way somehow facilitated this needs to face the gavel. They should be put in prison for the rest of their fucking lives. And many of them even worse. Some of them like prime ministers. It makes you think why, under the Blair administration, that the punishment for treason was reduced from the death penalty to life imprisonment. That happened very early in Tony Blair's administration, and Tony Blair when he took over. Given how the country's turned out since then, that should tell you a lot. That should tell you a lot. I believe it was in 1998. Tony Blair took over in 1997, and then it was early in 1998, if I'm not mistaken, that the Treason Act was revised to change the punishment for it from the death penalty. Change the punishment from the death penalty to simply life in prison. And then you see how the country's turned out since he took over, and you think, maybe it was all part of his plan. Maybe it was all part of his plan. Maybe it was all part of the plan all across the Western world. So obviously, Americans are feeling very thankful that Trump is in office right now. He's had a very, very good presidency so far, all things considered. Canadians, on the other hand, not so much. Canadians, on the other hand, dealing with Mr. Mark Carney, who I think was even more of a globalist than Justin Trudeau, at least he doesn't seem to have the blackface problem, says that all Canadians must come together, quote unquote, around the values of Eid. These are Muslim values, these are Canadian values, he said. As I said, this is coming down, this is not coming up from the people, ladies and gentlemen. This is being exerted down from the top by force. And that's what makes it a sinister agenda. This is not in any way an organic change. This is completely manufactured by the political class who had no right and no remit to sell out their people and their countries the way that they have.
This is a special day, and the message of Eid resonates in this room, across this city, and I may say it should resonate with all Canadians. It's a story that some of us hear with slightly different nomenclature, whether the prophet is called Ibrahim or Abraham, Ishmael or Isaac. The lessons and values of Eid are the same.
Sure about that, bro?
Canada, our Canada, is a diverse country. Proud home to different languages, different beliefs, different cultures. Those are different.
So the thing is, ladies and gentlemen, when he says that Canada is a diverse country, they'll never say then Canada, home of the Canadian people. They can never say that and justify what they've done. So with every single statement, ladies and gentlemen, it should be resoundingly clear by now, if you can't see it, whose side the people are on. Whose side your leaders are on, sorry. They're not on the people's side. They're not on your side. Every single time, whether it's a Welsh politician talking about the nation of sanctuary, whether it's Mark Carney talking about the values of Eid, which are completely alien to the Western world. Islam is alien to the Western world. We fought, as in Europe and the Western world, fought for 1400 years and more to keep Islam out of the country, to keep Islam out of our countries. Yeah, the historic Battle of Vienna towards the end of the late I can't remember exactly when it was, in the 1800s, was basically like the last stand. If the Muslims had been able to get through at Vienna, they probably would have colonized all of Europe. You know, they'd already made very good inroads, I believe, into Spain at that point. Loads of European countries had fallen. And obviously it was Muslim colonization, persecution of Christians in the Holy Land and the lands surrounding it. So you had what is now known as the Land of Israel. You know, you had Iraq, you had Lebanon, you had all of these countries that were predominantly Christian at the time because Islam did not even exist yet. And it was, Seljuk Muslims that were going up and down, raping and pillaging, doing some of the worst atrocities ever seen in history. And obviously then Pope Urban, I believe it was Pope Urban II, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. I might have my history slightly wrong there. Might get the numbers confused. After the call for help from the East, said, yeah, boys, let's go on a right old fucking trip and free the Holy Land. Let's go free our Christian brothers and sisters that are being enslaved and raped and en masse, you know, all up and down the country. And then it was later on in the 1800s that it was a stand at the Vienna that basically stopped it from colonizing us then. Now they've realized, along with the globalist organizations like the UN, WHO, World Economic Forum, and all the rest of them, they've realized that they probably can't do it by force. Because we're quite strong nations for the most part, and quite strong people, they're not going to be able to do it by force. They've tried that before. It didn't work. They got so far, but it didn't work. It wasn't successful. You know, the only people that were really successful in that regard, you could say, I suppose, were the Roman Empire, right? Which obviously after Christ resurrected, converted to Christianity. So they realized they couldn't do it by force, so they've done it by empathy instead. They've done it by playing the victim card, basically. By bringing these terrorists and bringing these people over as quote-unquote refugees. By causing a bunch of conflicts in the Middle East and in the Near East. Causing a bunch of needless wars and needless death to the tunes of hundreds of thousands and millions of people as an excuse to bring them over so that they could use them to replace the ethnic population and render their vote useless so that they could implement whatever system they fucking wanted. So that they could implement basically a one world government system. That's what they wanted. That's why they sanctioned the mass rape, the rape genocide of over 1 million young British girls. That's why they're sanctioning everything that's going on in Ireland at the moment. That's why they're sanctioning the police to beat up Irish teenagers for not wanting a bunch of foreign migrant men, military-age men, in their communities, which they have every right to object to. But no. These are Muslim values. These are Canadian values, because Canada's obviously always been a Muslim country. The biggest lie that's ever been told is this whole blackwashing of history, basically. And I use that term because it's all tied in together. It's all tied in with the notion of intersectionality. And then we have this, ladies and gentlemen. So this is even more telling. This is even more telling, right? So this is an extract from Prevent Training. And if you don't think your government really does hate you, really hates you, then odds are you're a terrorist after what I am about to read to you now, ladies and gentlemen. So this is what the gov.uk website allegedly classes as terrorist ideologies. These are some of the things that fall under the extreme right-wing terrorist ideology. So it says here, we define extreme right-wing terrorism as the active or vocal support of ideologies that advocate discrimination or violence against minority groups. Well, whites are a global minority. So where is the people that advocate for discrimination and violence against them? Wouldn't they come under right-wing extremism, right-wing terrorism? Oh no, minority only means a certain subset of people, which in fact make up a global majority of the population. The three most, and have a think about why diversity is only needed in predominantly white countries. Have a little think about that, ladies and gentlemen. The three most common subcategories of extreme right-wing terrorist ideologies and the narratives are, and I'm going to bring this up on screen for you now, ladies and gentlemen. The reason one is highlighted: cultural nationalism. That Western culture, quote unquote, is under threat from mass migration and a lack of integration by certain ethnic and cultural groups. So if you have concerns that your culture, your country's and your people's culture is under threat from a bunch of foreigners coming in and literally changing the culture and not integrating to the culture that is already in place by the native people, that makes you a terrorist. That makes you a terrorist, ladies and gentlemen. So I think now you'll realize a lot of us are now on the same fucking side. You also have white ethno-nationalism. Mass migration from the non-white world and demographic change poses an existential threat to the white race and Western culture. And then white supremacism. That the white race is biologically, culturally, and spiritually superior to all other races. An alternative form of government ranging from fascist regimes to ethno-tribalism should replace Western parliamentary democracy. Now, you can point out all of the problems with mass migration from what is quote unquote the non-white world, whatever you want to call that, okay? Because they often, people like Koreans and Chinese people who do very well, like in America, for example, a lot of the Asian community, and I don't mean Asian as the way the euphemism to cover for predominantly Pakistanis, and they often use that term to try and subvert the Muslim underlying part, right? Not in the way that they use in that euphemism, the way that, you know, Asians, when you think of, you know, Chinese or Japanese or Korean, whatever it might be, right? People who in America, for example, do even better than just like white Americans, right? And they're often lumped in as being white themselves, because white in this instance is not actually meant necessarily fully as a racial characteristic. It's the bourgeois characteristic. It's a class characteristic, the way these people view it. Because again, you have to view it. These people are viewing it from a Marxist revolutionary lens. So this whiteness is kind of a cultural private property. There are only some people that are allowed to have, and others are permanently, or by virtue of their position, rejected from and not allowed to have, like a privilege kind of thing, right? That's the way they view it. So that's why you need to abolish whiteness, the same way that Marx wanted to abolish class and abolish the bourgeoisie. The thing is, everybody ends up suffering after you try and abolish that class in the way that Marxist goes about it. So eventually you lose the thing to do the revolution for. The revolution needs to keep on going. The thing is, the issue is never the issue with these Marxist types. It's always just the revolution. You know, you have the Greta Thunberg, right? The Greta Thunberg, right? As Michael knows to say. I love the way he says that. So I think I'm going to appropriate that. I think I'm going to appropriate Knowlesian culture by calling her Greta Thunberg. You know, the Marxist ideologue that we were all taught through school was like this picture of how we should be as children. Despite the fact that she's a massive retard. But again, the way they view it is they have to constantly be engaged in this revolution. They're constantly fighting the power. Even in many instances now, they are the power. But they still have to fight the power, because they have to fight the power or give the illusion that they're fighting the power in order to be able to still keep their position and how they're perceived as others as underdogs and oppressed. They need to constantly look like they're punching up, when in reality, everything now is punching down. That's the biggest thing. So again, as the person who posted this points out, however, that we need to realize, in many instances, Mr. How do I say his name again? Dries van Langenhove, I believe that's how you say it. I apologize if I got that name wrong. He called it out and he said, "Hey, Civnats, if we lose, we're all going to the same gulag." And he actually says you might as well stop the colorblind nonsense. And in this instance, this is where I want to get into the last part, which is white supremacism. Is you can have a problem with everything that's going on now. You can acknowledge all of the changes and that they're bad and everything like this, right? You can say all this stuff, and you can also be a person that does not believe that what the white race is biologically, culturally, and spiritually superior to all other races. okay? Because you look, for example, at a lot of the Christian population around the world. Now, it did trouble me a little bit when somebody shared with me a lot of troubling rape statistics out of Africa, for example. But a lot of places throughout history where the population was not of a, very white physical characteristic, a lot of the Christian lands, very good moral and ethical systems because of where it originates from, and that is Christ, So again, you can acknowledge that differences in culture and differences in custom and morality may coincide with race, but it's not necessarily race that causes that. A lot of people will, in fact, go down this white supremacist believing that they are superior to others, inherently superior. And I would say, at least if you're in any meaningful sense a Christian, for example, you can't really say that because everybody's made in the image of God, right? Humans are made in the image of God, and they have inherent dignity. But then you can acknowledge, you can say that. And for example, that's why I think Josh Fernie pointed this out really well in our interview with him. Said that we don't necessarily believe that we're like massively better than anyone else or anything like that, inherently superior in a lot of ways that people try to characterize. So we want each peoples that are native to a certain land to be able to prosper and have self-determination in that land. And that then goes for us as well. He said a really nice line. He says, it's not out of, I can't remember the exact line itself, but it's not out of hatred, it's out of love. Everything is out of love. It's out of love for our land, love for our people, and the want for everybody else to have that in their own homelands. And you can't argue too much with that perspective, with the way that we're in the UK at the moment, where we're outright being colonized. At the time that it's going, at the pace that it's going, the thing we have to acknowledge is unless we implement some kind of peaceful solution now that might make us a little bit uncomfortable in some ways, we're going to let this go down the road even further, and then we're going to have to implement an even bigger, less peaceful solution later on. So we have to make a decision as to where we're going to go. But ultimately, as he does point out, look, if you have any kind of patriotism, we're all going to the same gulag if these people get their way. So get over it. Let's stop the infighting and let's get on with it. So I can't remember if there was anything else that I wanted to go over. The big thing that this is all about, right? So this is a Democrat representative in America now, known as Maxine Waters. And I think we covered it in a previous episode where she was trying to get into a federal building to talk to, I believe it was one of the insurrectionists from LA, I believe. And she had the door shut in her face, which was fantastic. But again, people exposing it, people can't help but say the quiet part out loud is that she just demanded, as a solution to the problem that is being caused, by these many instances foreign nationals that are rioting in America, and America has every right to deal with however the fuck they want to within certain things, as long as they're not, committing crimes against humanity or anything like that. She demanded, sorry, my dog's just stood up on the sofa for some reason. What are you doing? She demanded that the solution be give them citizenship. And they're the cat's out of the bag. And you wonder why people call it the Great Replacement? That's why. And you can make damn sure that the people who are calling themselves, or the people that the government are calling refugees and asylum seekers, they're not bringing them here out of the kindness of their hearts. They're bringing them here, for example, just like they do it in America, to replace the voting bloc of the native population, because they will give them citizenship, they will give them passports and voting rights and all the rest of it. We saw in Ireland, for example, that asylum seekers are being given the right to vote. Should never be happening. And again, cats at the back, they can't help but say it. But think of the nation of sanctuary when you hear Maxine Waters talk about this now, ladies and gentlemen. Just keep that nation of sanctuary plan in your mind, and what she says here will make it all make sense if it hasn't already.
Stop here where the guns are. I want you all to take pictures of these guns and let people know that they're in our city with guns, and I'm sure they have orders to shoot and kill. I don't know, but otherwise they wouldn't have guns.
One question, Representative Ms. Waters, if there's one statement or a message that you can send to Donald Trump, what is that message here today?
My message to Donald Trump is you are a cruel, human beings, and that you are using the poorest people in the land, the most vulnerable people in the land, to promote your politics. You are wrong. We know what this is all about. We have people who are immigrants here who are trying to seek a better living, who have come from places where they have experienced this kind of thing that he's doing here today. People who work every day, people who are paying taxes, who are raising their families, who are supporting education. They should not be treated this way. They should be given an opportunity to tell their story, whom they are, and why they're here, and ask the United States to please do what the Constitution allows us to do, and that is give them consideration for having citizenship here.
Ms. Maxine Waters, thank you for those words. Another thing, do you find it coincidental that this is happening at
There it is.
time of the year right now? Is there anything
There it is.
correlate with the timeline?
Ask you to do what the Constitution demands we do, and give these people that have burned police cars, thrown rocks and bricks at ICE cars, mob rule around cars, as far as I know, in similar ways that we saw in France recently with the riots that were going on over there. I feel for those young girls. I hope they got out of there okay. To the extent now where Ron DeSantis has to come out and say, look, if you are accosted by a group that surrounds your car, you have a right to get yourself out of there safely. And if you run them the fuck over, they should be out of the way of your car if they're blocking the road or trying to block you in and harass you or even harm you. And we've seen, for example, that they pull them out of the cars and do whatever the hell they want. Like, think about it. That car is your little bit of safety. As soon as you get pulled out of the car, it's like a rabid fucking animal. You know, it's like a group of rabid animals that are on you, right? So you have all these people that do all of these really disgusting things, you know, rioting, causing a foreign insurrection that even the president of Mexico says, yes, go do this more, yeah. And the solution is give them citizenship? You think they're going to be fucking grateful? You think they're going to be fucking grateful? No, what happens when you have a bully and you constantly try to appease them? No, they're going to keep pulling on that string, keep pulling on that thread, and see how much they can get. They get from the guy that experienced it all throughout his childhood, right? You try and appease bullies, you try and make excuses or whatever it is, you try and get out of it just by giving them a little something, hoping they'll go away. No, they'll come back because they're like fucking sharks. These people are like fucking sharks. They need to be dealt with as such. They need to be dealt with as such. They'll come back and they'll be expecting more because they know that they can get that from you. If they know, for example, if people know that you can go into the US illegally, cause a riot and get citizenship sooner than waiting in line for the legal immigration process, where's the incentive to wait in line for the legal immigration process? There isn't one. There isn't one. You can go be a fucking terrorist and you'll get granted citizenship to that country quicker than if you're actually a good person and wait in line and you actually have something to bring to the country. No. It's because, in these people's eyes, in the eyes of people like Maxine Waters, in the eyes of people, many people in the Welsh Parliament, in Welsh Senedd, that they are looking at this solely, as Leonard Morgan herself said, about changing the attitudes of the white majority. And getting in a bunch of fucking foreigners that are then able to do that via political means and keep the political heads that are already in power, because guess what? They'll vote for the person that held the door open for them. So not only does the person gain from betraying their own people, they gain once the betrayal is complete because they'll be likely rewarded with a new position because they helped out the invaders in the first place. Either that or some people will do away with them as well. You never know. If we end up with an entirely foreign government, odds are a lot of the people that help them get into power, because that's what happens when you do a coup, right? You'll have a certain subset of really important people that you'll keep alive, and then the rest of it when you do a coup, you'll end up killing a lot of your own people as well and siding with the people that help you gain the power. But again, that's what these people are concerned with. And it all sums up very well in 3 words. The Great Replacement. And we're going to leave you with one more thing ladies and gentlemen, which, if you thought you were insane, I'm hopefully going to give you something now that's going to help you feel a little bit better and a little bit more sure of yourself that, you know what, I'm probably okay, because at least I'm not these people. This is, I believe, because you can see the Hollywood stars, so this is again in LA, that I'll just let it speak for itself.
Hi!
Can you tell me about your dog?
This is Honey. He is a gay, gender-fluid, golden retriever Afghan hound mix.
Yes! How did you know that he was gay?
We have another dog named Charlie. He's about 7 years older than Honey, and they are completely inseparable.
Oh, hi! Happy Pride! Okay, well, that's the gossip.
Hi!
Can you tell me about your dog?
This is Honey. He is a gay, gender-fluid, golden retriever Afghan hound mix.
That'll do. That'll do for that. Now, another thing, I got sacked from my job, believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, recently, was another thing that I'm going to say now. On this, what appears to be this gentleman, there doesn't seem to be a lot of testosterone on display. Yes, that is actually a remark that was cited against me in a past podcast episode on why one of my now ex-employers let me go. And I made a joke saying that it doesn't look like there's too much testosterone on display here. And I believe it was about a Pride event, if I'm not mistaken. Might have been about the police. I don't know. Might have been about a flimsy police officer that was arresting people for thought crimes. I can't really remember. But we have, ladies and gentlemen, a quote-unquote, I feel so sorry for this dog. At least, from how healthy the dog looks, at least I know that we don't have to put in a referral to some kind of animal charity, some kind of dog charity for neglect, because it doesn't appear to be on a vegan diet. It seems to be quite excited. It seems to be quite happy that people are making a fuss of it and stuff like that, as dogs do. All right, I could bring my lovely black Labrador Bailey over here right now, and she'd love being made a fuss of and stuff like that, and we feed her, obviously, very nutritiously. So that's all well and good, it seems. It does not seem that the dog is being neglected in that way. But it certainly does have an owner, which worries me, that is somehow likely even more detached from reality than the dog in this instance, with a gay gender fluid, and this is the point which I can believe, actually, golden retriever Afghan hound mix, okay? I can actually believe that part. Apparently the dog is gay and gender fluid, so apparently it can, I don't know, change its... Can it change its genitalia at will? That'd be quite an interesting talent if it could. I mean, I don't know. Again, I asked that question because we always told that we need to affirm people's gender by cutting off their genitals and cutting off their boobs and stuff like that. So how do I know how to affirm the dog's gender? How do I know what pronouns to use or anything like that? But of course, the reasoning is the bit that really gets into the guys. How did you know he was gay? How did you know? And apparently, it's because she has another dog. I'm assuming it's a she. I don't know. It might be, I don't know. It might be an it. Who knows? If it's not either he or she, and it's not part of the human species, which is a sex binary species, I don't know. Just going to use the terms that seem to be most appropriate to me. That she says, we have another dog named Charlie, who's 7 years, I think she's 7 years older. Yeah, 7 years older. And they are just, quote unquote, completely inseparable. They are just completely inseparable. And that means that your dog, whom I don't know whether to say, how can we know the dog is gay if it's gender fluid? If its gender, quote unquote, changes whenever the fuck it wants, how the hell can we know if it's gay or not? Because gay would imply that it's attracted to the same sex. That's what gay would imply, right? So if it can apparently just change what it identifies with at will, see what I mean? This is just so confusing. It's not even confusing. It's just completely absurd. It's not confusing at all. And of course, the dog is just happy to be getting the fusses and is like, yeah, what's going on? Doesn't care. But of course, just because two dogs are completely inseparable, quote unquote, that means that the dog is gay and gender fluid. So I hope that gave you a little bit of a boost to your self-confidence, ladies and gentlemen, that at least you are not this level, wherever you are at the moment, you are not this level of detached from reality. You haven't achieved this peak enlightenment just yet. Hey, if we have anything to say about it, it'll never get anything worse than this, but I don't know. I don't know what the Lord has planned. But hey, certainly need to repent. That much is certain. That much is certain. Anyway, that'll do it for today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for watching. As always, hope you have a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever you are. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you for watching. Hwyl fawr. We'll see you next time. Have an amazing time. Godspeed.